Hello and good afternoon. My name is Kit Cabela of Hard Lens Media, and we are conducting a very special interview here at the Q4 radio station for CanTV. Hard Lens Media can be heard every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on Q4 Radio. And our special guest for today is Fritz. He is challenging Cook County Assessor Joseph Barrios this election cycle for 2018. And so essentially, we are really happy to have you here as a guest on our show. So for our viewers, can you at least explain why you are running for this office? Can you just give us like a short introduction of who you are?
Sure, thanks for having me, Kit. I grew up in Hyde Park on the south side, went to Kenwood Academy in the Chicago Public Schools, been a financial professional for 2 decades and valuing assets and stewardship, and I'm running for Cook County Assessor in the Democratic primary against Joe Barrios. My last name is Kaegi, spelled K-A-E-G-I, which a lot of people, it's kind of hard to spell. But the assessor's office is very important because it determines each family's share of the property tax bill that is levied on them by all the different taxing bodies. And it's supposed to be done based on the value of your home, but it's not being done fairly today, and it's led to great problems with inequity. There's also a pay-to-play operation going on in the middle of the office, very troubling corruption and ethics issues, and I'm running to change it.
All right. So on your campaign website, you address nepotism in Cook County.
Yes.
And it is quoted as this statement here. Under the current administration, the Cook County Assessor's Office has become synonymous with pay-to-play, corruption, and old-school nepotism, and it has cost regular taxpayers dearly. That will end when Fritz Kaegi is elected. Fritz will bring fairness, transparency, and the highest ethical standards to the assessor's office while ensuring that the staff reflect the diversity of the county itself. What will be your reformist policies, and how will you break the system of corruption that is affecting Cook County?
Thanks for asking. We're going to make the office ethical, transparent, and fair. First, because we're not taking donations from lawyers that practice before the office seeking assessment reductions. These folks today, they finance the current assessor's campaign, and it leads to great conflict of interest where we find these lawyers delivering most of the assessment reductions to downtown skyscraper owners at the expense of everyone else who lives in the neighborhoods and in the suburbs. So we're not taking those donations, and we're committed to extirpating political influence from the valuation of people's property. So that's one. 2, we're committed to transparency. Right now, the assessor's office won't even tell us how they're calculating our assessments. We don't know where they're coming from. There's no accountability for the assumptions that they're making for consistency. And it is outrageous because in every other county, they do this. They tell us how they come up with their assessments. So we're committed to being accountable, to showing our work, to opening up the data and the algorithms to third parties so they can hold this office accountable. That'll reduce the great regressivity and unfairness that we have in this system. And third, we're committed to running a better model that will generate less regressive taxes across the city. Right now, the Tribune showed in exhaustive detail last summer how huge swaths of this county, where millions of people live, are overassessed, sometimes by more than 100%. That means they're paying more than 100% of what they should out of their pockets. And it leads, that overassessment, it's a dry word, but it leads to displacement of people from their neighborhoods. People go into foreclosure and they lose their homes, causes businesses to disinvest, causes businesses to go vacant, homes to go vacant on the block. It leads to depopulation of neighborhoods, and it's money out of people's pocket at hard times. So we need to address the regressivity in the system by running a more fair model. That means downtown commercial paying its fair share and reducing the overassessment of people who live in the neighborhoods who've been most hit hard by the housing crisis.
Now, I think a lot of our viewers may not understand the difference between personal assessment of property and commercial assessment of property. So
yes.
What is the difference between the two?
Sure. Personal is your home. It's residential. Commercial is office buildings largely, mostly downtown. That's where the most valuable commercial property is in the city, and industrial would be manufacturing buildings or logistics buildings, which we do find, but that's not nearly as big a piece of the assessed value in the county. And the problem is that commercial properties, skyscrapers downtown, have zoomed up in value over the last decade and a half because institutional investors around the world, when you only get 2% on a bond, if you can get 5% on owning real estate, they're going to beat a path to our door. So the values of downtown commercial properties have skyrocketed, yet their assessments haven't. The commercial contribution to property taxes in Illinois in Cook County has continued to decline, and this is in large part due to the pay-to-play environment we have in the assessor's office, where lawyers who fund the current assessor's campaign are largely delivering reductions to these buildings. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Trump Tower, its bottom third was marked down 70% in the appeals process to just $4 million. And it saved Trump millions of dollars per year on the logic that this is substandard property, even though this is probably the most valuable land in the whole city. Similarly, Willis Tower was purchased for more than $1 billion just 2 years ago by Blackstone, the biggest private equity company in the world, one of the world's most astute real estate investors. Its mortgage is more than $1 billion, which means the bankers who lent them the money think it's worth more than $1 billion. It's assessed at just half that. And guess who makes up the difference? Everyone else does, the folks who own homes, especially folks who are not proximate to power, Black and brown communities, people who've been hit by the housing crisis, more modest homeowners everywhere. That Tribune research last summer, it showed that the more modest your home, in every part of Cook County, the higher the rate you pay. That is not supposed to be the way this property tax law and system works.
So speaking of that, we've seen large real estate developers move into these low-income minority communities. Harlan's Media has covered them in Pilsen, Northwest Side, and even in South Austin communities here in Cook County. And there have been many activists and grassroots organizations that are there representing the people who are trying to stop the displacement of people. Pilsen, for example, we've covered a few of their press events to where they said around 10,000 people have been displaced. Cultural icons and locations have been shut down or been demolished. So essentially, if you are elected, what will be your policy in regards to dealing with the large influence of real estate developers, and how will you plan to help out low-income, working-class families who have to deal with the ever-increase in rent and housing prices?
Well, first of all, by running a less regressive model, we're going to be greatly reducing that overassessment problem that causes people to be displaced. So that's one. We're committed to doing that. We don't need a new law to do that. With new leadership and the courage to implement these changes, we can deliver that on the authority of the assessor's office. But there are two other big things that we can do to address this issue. One, they're the things that the assessor's office can do without needing new laws. And then there are things where we can seek legislative remedy. So in terms of what we see today is the office devotes an extraordinary amount of resources to the folks who appeal. Those are largely people at the top end of the income spectrum in wealthier neighborhoods, yet the assessor's office is holding workshops all around the county saying, oh, we're getting it wrong, you should appeal your property taxes, which happens to be very convenient for the lawyers who specialize in property tax appeals, who fund the assessor's campaign. What we want to do is get it right the first time so that we don't have to devote as much resources to promoting the appeals process, and let's instead promote and make people aware of the exemptions that people are entitled to as citizens in this county. That includes exemptions for long tenure in neighborhoods. These are given so that people can not be subject to the force of gentrification. Also for seniors, there's some great exemptions for them, especially the senior freeze. And many seniors don't get it because they don't know that they can. That's the most valuable exemption we have in the system today. And the assessor's office needs to be doing more to promote the awareness of that, because many seniors don't apply for it, especially those who don't speak English as a first language. So we want to make this available to folks who speak Chinese, Polish, Spanish, all the other languages that our wonderful, diverse community in Cook County speaks and might be owning their homes in. The other thing that we can do is seek legislative remedy to improve this system. I think it's outrageous that to qualify for some of these exemptions, you have to apply every year to demonstrate, well, I was a senior citizen last year at age 65, and now I have to reapply at age 66 and age 67. That's not right. We can get a legislative remedy to change that. I think also we need to make things more transparent. Transparency is very important for holding this office accountable, and I think we should seek legislative remedies to make the system more transparent. And the third thing is that we need to find things to help out renters. Right now, our exemptions are focused on property owners. That's generally the way the assessment system works, but we can try to find ways to encourage long-tenured tenancy and to encourage people who've been there for a long time in the stabilization of rents if we can give some benefits to multi-unit property owners who own multi-unit properties who commit to longer-term tenancy and predictable stabilized rents.
So let's address your opponent in this race, and that is Cook County Assessor Joseph Barrios. And there's been a lot of criticism towards him and his tax plan, which is known as the Barrios tax. And recently, Harlan's Media did this live stream at the Chicago Teachers Union Center, and there were numerous groups there that were critical of the Barrios tax plan. Our Revolution Illinois, Blacks in Green, Pilsen Alliance, the Resurrection Project, Northwest Side Housing Center, and all of them came to the same conclusion, that it's a problem. So what is the impact of the Barrios tax, and what does your tax plan look like in comparison to his?
So the Barrios tax is shorthand for this phenomenon of regressive overassessment. So overassessment means that you're paying more than you ought to be paying in terms of your share of the total property tax levy in this county. And it largely falls on Black and brown communities that are the most overassessed. And when we're talking about the Barrios tax, that's what that means. It also impacts businesses because, yes, on the residential side, people get displaced when they're being overassessed. So that means on average for a $130,000 home, people are being overassessed, people are paying property taxes probably by about $500 too much every year. That is enough to flip people into foreclosure, to cause tens of thousands of people to be displaced across the county. But also if we look on the business side, businesses, when they're overassessed, they can't hit their numbers. So then they start to disinvest, and then they close. And then new businesses who are looking at the opportunity, they don't invest because it's hard for them to hit their numbers too. So businesses go vacant, and that hurts the surrounding businesses too. That is the Barrios tax. That's what Our Revolution Illinois, which has endorsed us. It's the largest grassroots organization in Illinois. That's why they've endorsed us, because they see this as a huge problem that affects millions of people in Cook County, especially those who have been impacted by the housing crisis. It's not supposed to be this regressive, and we can change it.
So now we all know about the Freedom of Information Act, and there's a law that basically gives you the right to access information from the federal government or local governments as well. And in regards to this, your campaign promises on this, basically stating that you will comply with all outstanding Freedom of Information Act requests and make responding to Freedom of Information Acts as a priority. And so basically you're opening this office for people to investigate any kind of misdeeds or past work that the Cook County Assessor, whoever it was, be it Joseph Barrios or previous holders of that seat, people can look into the information in regards to how they handle that office. So should you be elected, how will you allow the press and citizens to access these Cook County documents, and are you concerned about pushback or resistance from other local government officials?
Well, the great thing about this issue of transparency, which is one of the key planks of our campaign, is that the assessor's office has the authority to determine the standards of transparency under which it operates. We don't need a new law from anyone else in the county telling us what we can and cannot disclose about valuation standards, how we're valuing properties. And it's an outrage that in this county, they won't even tell us how they're coming up with people's assessments, because it's basically coming up with your share of this giant bill. In every other county, they do this. It's actually the law in Illinois, in the property tax code, that the valuation standards are a public record. You go to every other county, they'll tell you how they came up with your assessment. We should be doing that here. Why? Because there is no accountability for the work that's being done. We don't know if there's bias built into their formulas or not. We don't know how they're coming up with these numbers. To make the office accountable, third parties have to see, are we using consistent assumptions across neighborhoods, across racial boundaries? Because we have so much segregation in Chicago and in the county. Are we being consistent across modest homes to wealthy homes? All of this can be supervised by outside parties like the Better Government Association, the Civic Federation, academic bodies, the Brookings Institution, if they have access to the data, if we're complying with FOIA requests. We also want to open up the algorithm so that people can make sense of this data and double check our work. I think that'll concentrate the minds of the people working in the assessor's office and the assessor himself on being accountable to everyone. And I think the true measure of how well we're doing in this office is how well are we doing for the folks who don't appeal. Because that in itself, if we're focused on that, that will reduce the regressivity and unfairness in this system.
Speaking of unfairness, Chicago, Cook County as a whole has a history of segregation and racism towards minority communities. Gentrification is currently playing a role in displacing people and changing communities. It's clear that the large real estate developers have a large influence over our local elected officials in Chicago and in Cook County. The social, economic, and mental impact of gentrification that it puts on working class families and minority people who live in these communities cause many of them to worry about their family's future, their own future, and the possibility of even continuing to live in that community. So is this system that's currently right now in place another form of racism, and why is it yet to get any media attention or any action from local county officials?
I believe the textbook definition of structural racism is when there's a racially disparate outcome to a system, regardless of what intent or motive might be. And that is clearly what we have here today, because if we look at the pattern of overassessment that came out in that reporting series by the Chicago Tribune last summer, that was more detailed than it's ever been. They looked at every parcel in the county, 1.5 million residential parcels, pulled all the data on them, looked at actual transactions. If you plotted a map of overassessment with a map by race, it's an almost perfect correlation. West side, south suburbs, western suburbs. The neighborhoods with black and brown communities are the most overassessed. It's outrageous. And that's an example of structural racism, a textbook example. So when people talk about, sometimes you hear this phrase, colorblind society. We cannot be colorblind because it doesn't matter what the motive is. It matters what the outcome of the process and the system is. And that's why the system needs to be changed right now. It needs new leadership. It needs someone with the courage to take this on and bring it about. That's why we got the endorsement of our Revolution Illinois and great leaders like Chuy Garcia, David Orr, people who really represent progressive politics in the Chicago area. We're very proud of that. We're going to have more coming because people know how important this is to changing a system that's totally unfair. There's a social injustice to how this system is working.
Now, let's also deal with another thing that Cook County is known for, and that is being the most heavily taxed county in the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
Recently, there was a law that was passed called the soda tax. It's been now repealed. And its main purpose was to be an additional source of revenue so that the city, county can basically pay its workers and continue to push forward.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's been repealed, so now there's a lack of revenue, and there's a lot of city workers and county workers who might lose their jobs or might be laid off. So the argument for this was to have more revenue. What is your revenue plan for Cook County, and will you hold the large corporations accountable?
Well, just to be clear, the assessor does not tax itself. All the different taxing bodies are the ones that levy taxes. The assessor is determining each property owner's share of that property tax bill. But the assessor certainly can speak up about these issues because the big state of play here in Illinois is that we actually have one of the lowest income taxes amongst our surrounding states. Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Kentucky, even parts of Indiana, if you include their counties, have higher income taxes than we do here in Illinois. And how do we make up for it? We make up for it with property taxes. That's largely how we finance education in Illinois, and property taxes are very regressive. But the problem with that is that we're making it even worse. It's already regressive to start, even if we're getting the assessments perfectly right. But please don't make it worse by having an assessment system that compounds the regressivity by unfairly overassessing and taxing the poorest, most disadvantaged communities, because that's what we have today. Like I said, The more modest your home in every neighborhood today, the higher the rate you're paying. That's what the Chicago Tribune showed last summer, and it's outrageous. So what we can do is get our assessment system right. So we're curing that problem. We're curing the problem of regressivity that's unnecessary in our system. We're having everyone paying their fair share. We're using state-of-the-art methods and data to get there. But then the assessor also needs to be a voice for changing the way we finance government in Illinois. More needs to be done through progressive income taxation. That's why we need to look to the governor's race to find the candidate that we think is most sincerely committed to making progressive income taxation happen in Illinois. It's been talked about for a real long time. It's very important. It's desperately important for communities like the Southland to get that done and to have a more equitable revenue sharing formula for education. Most property taxes are for education. So if we get that piece right in Springfield and the assessor can be a credible voice on that matter, let's get it done, and let's find a governor, let's elect a governor who can do that.
Now, you mentioned education. Here in Cook County and City of Chicago, Mayor Emanuel, he has enacted some policies in the past in regards to shutting down low-performing schools, and now there's talk about him shutting down an additional 30-plus schools just so that he can fix the budget. However, I don't think a lot of our viewers really understand the impact of a school closing can do to a community. How does that affect home prices, renters, and the commercial businesses that are there when a school is shut down?
It certainly has a big impact. You know, I went to a neighborhood school. I went to Kenwood Academy in the Chicago Public Schools in Hyde Park, turned me around as a student. I'm very proud of it. And neighborhood schools are very important community assets, just like businesses and homeowners are. And what we find today with this problem of overassessment is overassessment leads to people being driven out of communities because they go into foreclosure, they can't sustain the property tax payments, causes businesses to disinvest. When businesses disinvest and then they close and then they're not replaced, not only does that hurt the community, it hurts the businesses that surround them because there are fewer people on the block go into their businesses. And that's what happens when you close neighborhood schools. When you close neighborhood schools, just like when you lose businesses and when you lose people who've been there for a long time adding to their community, it hurts the whole community. And you talk to people who send their kids to neighborhood schools, and I know this is not part of the assessor's race here, but I just speak from my heart here. Parents who are sending their kids to neighborhood schools want those schools open. They're popular with the people who are sending their kids there. People want their neighborhood schools to continue to operate, and it's not fair when folks are saying that we know better than you do, and we're going to send your kid across town because we think we know better. And that's something that needs to be changed.
Now, what's really interesting about your campaign is that you have promised not to take any contributions or any support from property law, tax lawyers, and other large corporations. You're doing a grassroots campaign. But there's a lot of critics towards people who run these kind of campaigns. Like, you can't beat establishment candidates. You can't beat the machine here in Cook County. So what do you want to say to those critics who say that you can't beat an establishment candidate, that you can't outraise them?
When we go out and we talk to people, there's a total awareness of the issues of this campaign. People are mad about the ethical cloud over this office, about the pay-to-play, about the social injustice of the inequity of overassessment that affects millions of people on the south side, west side, south suburbs, west suburbs, and it's all wrapped up in a property tax bill they get every year. Folks who live in the south suburbs, they just got their bills. So this is front and center of their awareness. You go to a bar or a block club or a concert, this is on the tips of people's tongues. People are talking about this, and I'll tell you, the old guard and the machine politicians, they are just fine. They're content with Joe Barrios, the chairman of the Democratic Party. But the voters, the living and breathing voters of Cook County, are completely done with the unfairness, the ethical cloud, the social injustice of Joe Barrios, the assessor. We find this. People are grabbing our petitions out of our hands to sign them. When we did petitioning and submitted them, we had over 22,000 signatures all over the community, people eager to sign us and embrace what we're doing. When we're getting that message out, people really like the idea of someone whose career has been about valuing assets and about stewardship like mine has. I've been a financial analyst for over 2 decades. I'm a chartered financial analyst, a certified Illinois assessment officer. I have an MBA from Stanford. People like the idea that we want to bring professionalism to this office, bring good people in, use modern data standards and technology in this office, and extirpate politics from the process of valuing property.
So it's quite clear that you really care about this race. 2018 midterm is really going to play a huge impact, and people want to have real social change and social justice, and the effects of the large real estate developers that have come in to Cook County have really led a lot of people to become more actively involved in grassroots organizations and to play a real impact into creating some real progressive policies, especially here in Cook County. So I think for our viewers and listeners who will follow us on social media or watch us on CanTV or listen to us on Q4 Radio, where can they learn more about your campaign? Where can they find you guys on social media so that they can help you out, maybe perhaps to volunteer or donate to your campaign, or perhaps share with their neighbors about your challenging Joseph burials for Cook County Assessor?
Well, keep following great media outlets like Hardlands Media and watching CAN as well and QE Radio. Also, you can go to our website at fritzforassessor.com. That's F-R-I-T-Z for assessor.com. And my name is spelled F-R-I-T-Z, and the last name is K-A-E-G-I, pronounced Kaegi. And there you can find all sorts of interviews we've done, not only with your outlet, but also with other outlets on radio, on TV, in the print media. There's been great, amazing coverage of this race. The Economist magazine wrote an article about this race that's of international importance. Brookings Institution, a major research institution in Washington, is focusing on this race. The Tribune has been writing a lot about it. You can go to our Facebook site where look for Fritz Kaegi for Cook County Assessor, and you can find out about events that we're having, recent going-ons, like our page, and you'll always be informed about what we're doing. We're going to be a lot out there in the community too. We've had wonderful endorsements from people like Our Revolution Illinois, Chuy Garcia, David Orr, State Senator Heather Staines, great leaders of faith on the south side and west side, Mayor Alsbury, the head of the South Suburban Mayors and Managers Association, and more is to come. So you can find out by staying abreast on our website and on our Facebook page.
Well, that's a very good note to end it on. We want to thank you so much for joining Hardlands Media.
Thanks a lot, Kit.
But what do you want to say to perhaps maybe people who are sitting in the sidelines choosing not to get involved?
Well, I got to say, we're hitting rock bottom. We've hit rock bottom in terms of so many things in our politics, and we see a lot of great people getting mobilized. Just like I remember, I grew up in the 1980s in Hyde Park in Chicago when Harold Washington was getting elected mayor, and that's the last time there was a great upswell of progressive activism in Chicago local politics, and it made a huge difference that we still benefit from today. People today should get involved in their local campaigns. We've got a great campaign. You can volunteer for us. We need you, but also people need to get focused on this tax bill that passed through the Senate, and try to find a way to get involved in an issue where you think you can have an impact. Go out and volunteer for a campaign, phone bank, canvass, and run for office if you feel like you got it in you.
Well, that's a very good note. Thank you so much for joining Hardlands Media. To all our viewers, please follow us on our social media. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Peace, and let's all do what we can to build a better future, everyone.
You're watching Hardlands Media.